Hey everybody, welcome to episode number 43 of the White Knuckle Podcast, powered by Ozonics. Undetectable, undeniable. Hey everybody, thanks for tuning into the White Knuckle Podcast. Today we have a special guest in Brad Kuhnert, who's a friend of Todd's, and he was at a White Knuckle film school a couple of years ago and was just an absolute joy to listen to. There's absolutely no way we could possibly cover all the information that Brad covered when he was down in Iowa that day back in July a few years ago. But we're going to take a stab at it here. We're going to break this show into 2 episodes, so I apologize up front that it'll be 2 episodes, and then we're going to have a follow-up episode this winter about what Brad does in the winter months, or rather spring months probably, to find and do all the homework that it is that he does, so that he can be successful in the fall. With that, I just want to remind everyone, Ozonics has a sale going on right now on their HR 200 and their 300, $100 off of either of those products. Normally, we would give you our WKP 2017 coupon code, which would give you 15% off, but this exceeds that. So you'd be better off just going to their website. You can go right to whiteknuckleproductions.com, click on the link to their sale, and it'll take you right to where you can order one of those units. Without further ado, here's our interview with Mr. Brad Kuhnert. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the White Knuckle Podcast. Today, I have with me, of course, my esteemed co-host, Todd Pringnitz, down in Iowa. And joined with us is a guy that I had the pleasure of listening to speak a couple of years ago at our team meeting, Brad Kuhnert. Brad, Todd, how's it going tonight?
Very good.
Dude, I am so pumped right now because we've had pouring down rain all day. A cold front moved in, and tomorrow morning I'm going out after one of my target bucks. So it's like perfect night to do one of these podcasts, man.
So you're jacked like you always are. This time it just happens to be for real.
This is going to be a kill day for sure. I'm pretty sure tomorrow, because we've got just the perfect front. So by the time any of the audience hears this, they're going to have already ruined and blown their only opportunity probably at killing a buck this year.
Oh, Todd, what are we going to do with you? You can't stop him, Brad. You can only hope to contain him.
Exactly.
Well, Brad, if anybody knows, it's definitely Brad. But how I got to know Brad is probably about 20 years ago, give or take, through Andre at Lone Wolf. Brad was one of Andre's friends and did a bunch of trade shows and hunted with Andre as well. And so the first time I ever really hung out with any of those guys, Brad was there and his wife Mary, and we proceed to have a great time whenever we're together. But Brad just was one of these guys who was a very humble, very quiet guy. Didn't say too much, and then you start to talk with him and listen to some of his theories and see some of the bucks that he's killed on public land and all over. And it's just like, he's the type of guy you just want to listen to. And so I was so fortunate just to get to spend all those years with Brad and Andre and Adam Hayes and Dan Infold and a bunch of other guys. So I had the best hunting mentors, basically, you could ask for, which I still believe is a huge reason why I've been so successful over the years. Thankfully, I had those mentors at the right time early in my hunting career, so to speak. But basically, in a nutshell, Brad is probably one of the best public land whitetail hunters, or at least most successful on big whitetails, is anybody you'll ever meet. And Brad, thank you so much for doing it.
Yeah, no problem.
And as you can tell, Brad is pretty short on words sometimes.
Yeah, you know what? Once we got talking at that meeting that we had, honestly, just the way that you approach hunting, I've thought about you several times, just because I've transitioned, Brad, from hunting, maybe a total of 180 acres of timber in the whole block that I'm hunting, to 700 acres of timber that, run for miles on a ridge in southwestern Wisconsin. I've thought of you 100 times while I'm looking at these maps and trying to figure out even where to start.
Jason, let's slam on the brakes a second. One of the most important key features of Brad that everybody needs to know is some of his hunting history and some of his successes. Bradley, you don't brag too much, so I'm going to brag you up a little bit. But you have killed not only some really nice bucks on public land in northern Wisconsin, but some true slammer whitetails. What are your, let's say, top 3 bucks that you've shot up on public land up there?
Well, as far as score-wise, or just, I mean, there's been, mature whitetails. Some of them have, scored obviously better than others. But
well, you've killed a few absolute slammers. But just tell a few of your top bucks. I think people will be quite impressed.
Well, as far as the biggest one that I shot was in 180 class gross. I shot that one late season several years ago. That one was a buck that I knew was in the area. Was I believe December 27th when I harvested that buck, and he was actually chasing a fawn doe, and that was the first time that I had ever laid eyes on him. But I had knew other people that had said that there was a buck of that size in the area, and the area I was hunting, I figured was an area he might be in late season, and it was 10 below that night when I did shoot that one, and the deer were up on their feet and moving, feeding in that cold weather, and I just happened to luck out with fawn coming in late in the estrus, and he happened to be chasing her and come by.
And how big of that buck was that score-wise, Bradley? Just give some people some ideas of the type of caliber animals you're chasing up there.
Like I said, I think that was around 180 gross.
I know that you've killed a whole pile of huge whitetails, and like I said before, Brad's not the type of person who wants to brag about it. And to be honest with you, I'm not liking the scores or anything like that, but he's killed a lot of really top-end whitetails and probably passed dang near as many. I know I always enjoyed you and Andre hunting back in Illinois when you come back to camp talking about all these different Boone and Crockett's you were passing because they weren't just the one you were looking for and you really didn't care. So it was always interesting. But what if you'd say on your public land hunting style, what was your biggest influence or who was your biggest mentor growing up that kind of was your person who kind of taught you how to roll?
Well, a lot of it, I guess, I hunted a lot with my dad, early on, and just learned stuff from him. But a lot of it was just trial and error through the years of getting up on public land. And when I first started hunting, was smaller tracts of public land and some private, but a lot of public down by Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And as I got older, the Northwoods just was kind of calling me, so I started hunting up there and hunted with a bunch of great guys up there. Don Moss, Bill Moss from Eau Claire. There were guys that went up and hunted a lot and learned. We kind of learned it together, and basically, just each year learning a little more and just like I say, just kind of trial and error and learning what worked and what didn't work and learning that you're hunting a whole different animal when you're up there in that big public land that, you just don't get to see a lot of them at all. I mean, you're hunting sign more so. You don't get to glass them in a field. You're hunting a big track, big rubs, but a lot of times you haven't laid eyes on the deer, so you're kind of hunting a ghost per se, and so that makes it a little more difficult or some people. They, that may not be their cup of tea, but for me, it was something that I really enjoyed doing, and I love the challenge of it, and so it's different from, there's you're hunting sign as much as you can than, trail cameras. You're not getting pictures of them, You're not seeing them in a bean field or something during the summer. They're just in the middle of the woods, and like I said, you're just kind of reading sign and hunting sign and hoping he's the mature whitetail you're after.
Well, and that's the one thing that people need to realize is that you don't use trail cameras. You have been hunting all these years and really never. I think you just kind of like dig the challenge. Obviously, I know you love hunting in the North Woods because I remember with you coming and hunting in Illinois, and this year actually Brad's hunting with me here in Iowa. But we've always had conversations where you're like, it's a little easy down there. It's just not the challenge like the North Woods. And I'm thinking to myself, holy crap, man. But you've been around the block and have had so many different. You had so many cool stories, man, of these different bucks you've hunted over the years. And I can't remember all of them, but some absolute, like, just out of your mind whitetail stuff I've never heard before. So one of the stories I love about Brad's hunting style is he was telling me he's hunting in the North Woods, and Brad is one of those guys who can hunt down to like 100 below zero, and like he'll never get cold. And if he does get cold, he's certainly never going to tell you he got cold. But he loves the cold weather like that. I would die. And he hunts up there and will be done hunting and have a buck, a target buck that he saw, and he'll get down and you track their tracks in the snow to go find out where they came from, where they were bedding and whatnot, correct?
Yeah. No, I've ended up, finding better areas than I was originally hunting, and harvesting some animals where when I was in my stand, it happened to be snow on the ground, and they went by out of range to shoot, and I basically, once they went by, I knew the deer wasn't going to come back, and that was a deer I would definitely want to go after seeing it. So I would get down and backtrack them and see where they came from. And a lot of times, by backtracking them in the snow, them tracks led me to, sometimes where he was bedded, where he was traveling and what he was doing, certain scrapes. And a lot of times, it happened several times where I moved my stand into that location where I finally found a spot where he was coming through that he'd been the most vulnerable. I mean, the wind was perfect, with a westerly wind generally speaking to come in and get to that spot. So, yeah, I mean, a lot of times I've done that on a lot of deer where I'll see them go by and get down and backtrack them for, whatever it takes, hours if need be, and learn and see what he was doing and where he came from. So that's one thing I've done several times, like I said, and it's been very successful for me.
Well, I mean, in a nutshell, you kind of think differently, do things differently than what pretty much anybody that I had ever even hung around with or anything. I think a lot of us have grown up watching these outdoor television shows and stuff, and you buy into a lot of the BS, so to speak. And Brad was one of the guys who kind of opened my eyes to like, oh, okay, I get it. It's not using these particular products. It's not this. It's just, dude, you've got to be willing to do things and try things most guys just aren't willing to. And I know, tying right into this conversation, Jason, I know you're probably dying to ask a question, but it ties in so well with this. But one of the projects that
I am, by the way.
Yeah, I know you are. But one of the things that Brad and I actually got the chance to work on together many years ago, Brad invented a stand that's called the Lone Wolf Assasin, or Lone Wolf was who produced it, but he owns the patents on this design. And it's basically that little mini platform that is combined with basically a little bit heavier duty full body harness that ties your waist into the tree, so you kind of face the tree. It's kind of like a sling saddle, but the platform itself gives you something to kick off from and to move around on very quietly instead of having to scrape against the bark. But the cool part about this stand, and we still use them for filming in different trees, is that you can literally put it up in a tiny tree. And so, Brad, how did it get to the point? I mean, I'm assuming kind of like myself, like you started to have to design products for your own needs because you were hunting like no one else hunted.
Yeah, I mean, that stand, that idea, just years ago of hunting in the North Woods, carrying a stand in, a lot of times getting to an area where, you could have used the climber, or you needed the sticks, or it just seemed like there was never one tree stand that would work all the time. Well, this one does. I mean, you can hunt in any tree. I've hunted in trees so small, as long as when I lean back, it'll hold my weight and not bust off. Or into big oak where you can get behind them oak trees, So facing the tree, to me, it's a huge advantage. And it's just a stand that you can take anywhere, not just in the North Woods, anywhere I go and any hunting trip. You can get in any crooked tree. I mean, it's just a stand that met my needs. And so basically, I ended up designing it and putting it together, and it's probably the stand that I use the majority of the time.
I can tell you that we have, I've never shot a deer from it, but we filmed multiple kills. Kyle's been sitting in it or standing in it, however you want to say. And dude, I got 2 or 3 trees this year that's the only cameraman stand that I can possibly get in the tree. But, I think that was kind of the rule was like, all right, if you have to be there, you just figure out a way to be there. And that's what sometimes takes some ingenuity and sometimes just a lot of work. But, that's the one thing I think you probably just have that ability to adapt to the situation like, somebody else. But what has always impressed me about Brad is just he's like the old school hunter who is a true woodsman and knows how to track deer by literally by their sign. And we say sign a lot, but we use trail cameras to do what Brad does, and it takes a lot of the work out. And we know what animals, we're hunting. And, that's one thing. I love the romance of the idea of not knowing what bucks are making the sign. And like the old days, you don't find out until he comes in. So I guess the positive of it is, what you're killing if you've got a bunch of pictures of these different deer. And if you're really trying to manage a farm, they kind of go hand in hand. But, I don't know. I kind of dig that about your hunting style, and that's still the way you hunt, Brad.
Yeah. Nope. It's my heart and soul is with hunting, in the North Woods. I mean, obviously, I hunt other areas, but my number one priority when I can is to hunt the North Woods and go after the big mature whitetail bucks up here. One of the things when you were talking about, a story or that's tracking in the snow, and this came about the time when I was thinking about the assassin of coming up with something, was I had went in, and there again, a big buck had went by, and I got down and I tracked him, and he had made a figure 8. He went down off this bottom through a slashing, kind of down into a creek bottom, through a swamp, and then he cut his track again in one spot where it crossed, like I say, like a figure 8. And so I thought I would set up 2 stands. I set up a stand on top, and then down in the bottom, in this edge of this slashing and along this creek, there was a couple smaller trees I wish I could have been able to get into, but I wasn't able to, so I had a smaller stand that I put up in there at the time. But anyway, the snow had melted, and it was like 3 days later, and I was sitting in that top stand where I thought he would come through, and he did, but I couldn't get a shot at him. So I figured it had to be the same buck, because it was just a monstrous, mature-bodied deer, and that track was one of the biggest whitetail tracks I'd ever seen. So when he went by me, I got down out of the tree, and I basically trotted about 200 or 300 yards and got down into that bottom where he was making that cross on that figure 8. And I got down in there, and I sat there for maybe 45 minutes, and here he come that exact same way he had done before, and I ended up shooting him at about 14 yards. But without the snow being there and tracking him, I would have never found that spot. But that's just one thing about, that's just one story about how tracking them deer and how it's paid off for me. And I believe that deer dressed just under 250 pounds, and it was rutted out. Had I shot him probably, a month earlier, month and a half, when he was still had some fat on him because he had 0 left. He probably dressed close to 280 pounds or even better than that maybe. So that was the biggest body deer I'd ever harvested up here.
No, in Brad, some of the pictures I've seen over the years, he's talking some fully mature deer, the stuff that we hunt down here in Iowa, which up there, I mean, those are the ghosts. And so I guess that's what you love about them. But you're going to get it easy this year, brother. You're coming down to Iowa and you're hunting with me, and it's going to be like basically hunting with an outfitter. All you got to do is wake up. We'll have coffee ready for you. And then you'll go wandering through the woods, scout, and probably move half of my tree stands.
Well, I doubt it.
Yeah, probably.
Well, hey, everybody, we're going to take a brief intermission from the show with Brad Kuhnert to tell you about this week's Ozonics prize package. The good folks of Ozonics have given us an HR 300 to give away this week. Here is what you need to do to win that 300. You need to go to this post on Facebook or Instagram or Twitter and share it and tag Ozonics in it. Now, if you aren't sure how to share it, go ahead and email me at jason@whiteknuckleproductions.com. I'll be more than happy to show you or tell you how to share it. In addition to doing that, I need you to go to our main webpage and fill out the Contact Us form. Send me your name, address, email, all that good stuff. And with the message in the Contact Us portion of Send Me My Ozonics. So with that, let's join back with the show with Mr. Brad Kuhnert.
Jason, I've taken enough of Brad's time here early on. Go for it.
Brad has always been fun to listen to. I'd never met him until, we had him, you had him into our film school just to talk just kind of about his style. And it's the first time that and not taking away from anything from anyone else, but it's the first time that I was really enamored, if that's a good way of describing it, with your style, Brad. And if you could just elaborate a little bit more. I know that typically you don't start hunting until later in the year, right? You're not out there on September 15th or 18th or whenever the season opens. What's the method to your madness? What's the process that you go through, I guess? And I know it's not the same every time, but overall, what would you say it is that you're looking for? Because earlier you said, sign. And so my question would be, what sign and when are you starting to look for this?
Mainly my scouting is all done in the spring. I do as much as I possibly can in the springtime. That's when I'm out the most, somewhat, looking for sheds maybe here and there, but really looking at what the sign was from the previous years in different areas. And from that, a lot of times I'm just hoping that deer that made that sign has made it through, the gun season and, hasn't been harvested. But most of the legwork or what I do is springtime. I'm out there scouting and looking at different areas as much as possible in the spring. And at that point is where I'm kind of putting my game plan together for the following year, that season, that particular year, as far as, back with the rubs and scrapes, and really trying to read that sign and figuring out where that deer is bedding, where he is feeding, and, just putting the whole piece of the puzzle together. And I'm trying to find, I'm talking, I might be in 4 or 5 different spots covering a, 20, 30 mile area in different areas. In case one area doesn't pan out, I've looked in other areas and have, 3 or 4 different spots to go to in case things change. Because, one year you can be hunting in an area and there's a ton of deer in there and it looks really, really good. But the acorns crop was great that year. Well, the following year, there's no acorns in that same ridge. That deer may have moved, a mile or 2 to a different area where there is food. So a lot of times, sometimes in patterns you do see, sometimes they'll change just with, like I said, with the acorns changing, or sometimes the logging, they'll come in and slash an area. And so everything changes. But I guess most of my leg work is done in the spring. I find the spots that I really want to hunt. I find where I think it's where the deer is the most vulnerable, where the wind is going to be in my favor. It's a spot that I can get in and out of without spooking a lot of deer, and just it's just a lot of time in the woods. But like you were saying, I usually do not start hunting these spots until end of October right through middle of November is when I'm looking. So you're right, I'm not out there much. If I would be if I do hunt early, I'm hunting maybe just the acorns and stuff like that. I'm not going into the spots where I think I'm going to have my best success of harvesting that mature whitetail buck until later in the year.
And you've got from our previous conversations, you've got enough confidence, and you should have, because I've seen the book of pictures that you brought with you. You've got enough confidence to sit there for 7 days in a row.
Yes. Yeah. No, I mean, once I guess I find the spot that I think I can get that buck at, I don't leave. I mean, I'll go into that area. I mean, when I figure this 100-yard area is my best chance of getting this particular buck from looking at the sign and everything else, at that point, what I do a lot is I'll go into that, like I said, maybe 100-yard area, and I will clear out maybe 3-4 different trees on each, 2 maybe on one side of the trail, another 2 on the other side of the trail, just so if the wind changes. Where I've had where I've been in the mornings, and everybody that's hunting's had the thermals and everything. The wind's blowing one way, and at 8 o'clock the sun's coming up and the wind changes. Well, I'll either have a stand with me and the other already placed on the other side of the trail, or in a different tree, or I just take that assassin down and I move it to a tree I've already have cleared out ahead of time. And so that allows me to stay in that area, and that I'm not worried about the wind, about getting winded in that area. So if the wind changes, I just get down and move to the other side of the trail. And I've done that many times. I've moved, and within a half hour later, I've shot a couple bucks where if I'd stayed in the tree I was in, the deer would have winded me. So
I want to interrupt real quick and just say that the first time I heard Brad and Andre and some of these guys talking about how they use wind, I felt like a freaking idiot, because they were talking about things that I had never even heard of before, about thermals and how you use them. But I mean, Brad, you can scream it and have the real proof in the pudding. It is all about the wind, isn't it?
Oh yeah. No, you can't beat their nose. That's the number one thing.
And that's another little point I have on here. I was very into a lot of scent elimination products, and had all these different bags and sprays and scents and dippers and lippers. And Brad was one of those guys who kind of said it how it was. You can't beat their nose. Now, I'm going to make Brad use an Ozonics while he's here in Iowa, and I'm going to show him what those tools do. But I don't think you've ever used them before, have you, Brad?
No.
So this will be I'll be basically pissing off the Indian, but I'm going to do it anyway, because I won't let anybody hunt on my ground or around it without one. But there's, without trying to make a lot of people mad or say certain products don't work, I mean, have you ever found anything that you could truly beat a whitetail's nose with, Brad?
No. I mean, I guess like you said, I'm kind of the old-fashioned guy. When I go into the woods, I grab some balsam and I rub down my clothes with balsam, and that's pretty much my cover scent. I haven't used a lot of them to really know one way or another if they would work. I just haven't. I guess in my way of thinking, I always in my mind am thinking I got to beat his nose. I guess I would, if by having a scent on me that I think's going to let me get away with something would probably make me, do something that I shouldn't do and make a mistake. If I imagine myself that I just dumped a gallon of gasoline on me, I know I stink. When I'm in the woods, I will make darn sure I do not let one deer get down, or a deer get downwind of me best I can.
Yeah.
So,
well,
I guess I've never used them products, and I just made myself make sure I'm in the best possible location I can, where the wind is in my favor, and he's not going to smell me no matter what.
And I'm sure that you're always looking at, setting up based on what's going to dupe the buck, meaning making him feel like he's got the wind to a certain degree, at least on angles and things like that. But to be honest with you, even with an Ozonics, that's pretty much my approach. The one nice thing about Ozonics for me is they're like, they're a backup plan for does, because we have so many more deer down here because of all the food and the population and everything. So there's a lot of areas that you're going to have deer come downwind. That's when that machine is absolute money. Not that you're trying to set up to have a buck come downwind, but inevitably around here, you're going to find out too, Brad. I mean, there's just a lot of deer. So you've always got deer to deal with. But where those big bucks live around here is generally in those thick areas right next to those doe bedding areas. And actually, I have a question regarding that. I know a lot of where you hunt is based on where the bucks are bedding and feeding. How close do you generally get? And I know that's a very vague question because each area is different, each buck's different, each setup's different. But how close is close enough to catch your bucks up there? And how aggressive do you get? Because I know I'm kind of like Andre, where I'll go after it and think second, like if I blow them out, I blow them out. I think you have to be a little bit more conservative just hunting those particular bucks. You blow them out, they're not going to come back to that spot like they do down in farm country necessarily. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, exactly. I very seldom, at the very end of the season, I might push the envelope and get really closer right in their bedding area. But for the most of the time, I just stay up. I know where they're bedded, pretty good idea most of the time, and I just stay, far enough away that I'm not alerting them that I'm even there. I mean, sometimes I'll have a setup where I might be, 300 yards away, 400 yards away. Now, these deer are traveling a lot of times a lot farther than they would in farm country to get to where their food source is. So sometimes, I mean, as far as setting up that far away, the food source still might be a half, 3/4 a mile from you at times where they're bedded. So being 300 to 400 yards away and to start with, and sometimes, if I found that spot, it just depends upon, like I said before, where I think he's the most vulnerable. If he's the most vulnerable 200 yards away or 100 yards from his bedding, that's where I'll be. If it's 400 or 500 yards, that's where I'll be. But generally speaking, I don't like getting, within probably, 200 yards of where he's bedded, because if I blow him out of there, like you said before, Todd, he's probably gone, and they just seem like when you put a little pressure on them up here, they just move, and you just never see them again. And
in layman's terms for everybody, the reason why is because down here in farm country, I have all these food plots that control the doe. So if I blow this buck out of a particular bedding area, most likely he's not going to leave the area. He's just going to move to a different bedding area. But oftentimes he'll be right back in that same bedding area because that's where the does are. That's where he needs to breed. He has to be there. So that's why I'm a little bit more aggressive when it comes to this farmland, just because there's a lot of options. I'd rather take my chances and get in tight. But yeah, when you're hunting big woods hunting, they can go to the next ridge over, and you're not. It's just a different kind of hunting. That's for sure. And to be honest with you, I did a bunch of that up in Michigan in my early years, and I'll take farm country any day of the week.
Yeah, well, them deer up here, where most of the places you're hunting, there's not a lot of people. I mean, there's people in and out, but they're not used to noise, or like in farm country, you got machinery running, and maybe hearing kids yelling or playing. Up where I'm hunting, it's pretty much dead quiet as far as noise, airplanes here and there now and then, then car traffic, of course, a little, but in some areas not even that. You get far enough in. So when there's anything out of the ordinary in there, them deer recognize it right away, and they just don't seem to tolerate it. So you like I said, I mean, I'll push the envelope later in the season if I feel I have to. I mean, there is some areas, as back to when we were talking about spring scouting, when I find that bedding area, I have probably cleared out a stand or two in that area too, but I basically, that's the last resort to go in there and hunt.
Yep.
And when I have done hunts like that before, I mean, this was, in the last, 25 years, if I had that tree cleared out in the bedding area, I mean, I would go back in if I'm going to hunt that stand, I would go in, and if I didn't have a stand there, I'd go in there, 2 or 3 hours after dark when I figured that buck would be gone, set that stand up, and be in it in the morning when he comes back. And so sometimes, like I said, if you're hunting public land, you don't have the luxury of leaving a bunch of stands, hanging everywhere. So you need something smaller and portable to get in and out to be able to do that.
Brad, if I can,
Yep.
You've mentioned it a couple times. I guess the first thing that you said is that you found a better spot. What made that spot better? And then in making that spot better, you also said you felt like it made him more vulnerable. What was it that you felt that made him more vulnerable? Was it topography, or was it just the way he acted? What makes the spot better, and what makes, in your opinion, makes a deer more vulnerable?
It's pretty simple. A little bit. It's getting that buck to go north and south. It sounds pretty easy, but up here it seems like them deer are always traveling east or west. It seems like it's hard to get them to go. You don't find the mature bucks now, I'm talking, where they have trails that they go north for a long way straight. Because if they're heading north, there's most of the time, generally up here, you got a west wind, some type, northwest, west, southwest. It's unbelievable when I've followed these, just the sign and what you see is how simple that sounds, but it's good to get them where they're going to find a spot that they're going that direction, straight north, or pretty straight north as it can be, for even 100 yards. And a lot of times that's one of the things I'm looking for. Now, if you can find them going that direction, straight north, and now you got a pond or a lake that's behind you where that wind is blowing out into an open marsh or anything. I mean, them are the dream spots. And at that point, I don't care if it's 2-mile walk to come from the east to get to that spot. That's where I'm coming from. So the wind will be in my face to get to that spot. And there's times where them deer will be in an area, and what I've done in the springtime is I found a really good spot, but I needed them to go a little more back, like I said, straight north, and I've found blowdowns, and I've drug them on their trails and made them deer kind of scoot over to where I'd be able to get into a better tree than what I might have been able to, plus everything is more in my favor. So a lot of it is the vulnerable spots for me is where he is heading more north, and it's a spot that I can get in and out of without spooking, many deer, to allow him to know that I'm even in there. But it's, like I said, it's kind of, when you really get looking to see what they're doing, they don't go that direction. At least from my experience, have found where them mature bucks go that, like I say, straight north for very long. And if they do, to me, that's the spot where I'll take advantage of. But if he's in an area where, like I said, I need to do something, I've I've hauled brush or just moved trees that are down or any branches just to get them to move a certain direction, and then kind of cut a little trail for them in the springtime, so by fall they're used to it, and basically they'll start following that trail I made for them. Hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
Yeah, I get the north-south thing. That makes complete sense. One of the other questions that I wrote down, and I'm guessing I know the answer, but how is it that you're so? I mean, when you told me that you sat in the woods for 7 days straight because you had so much confidence in the fact that this deer was going to come through, and you didn't even know what deer it was, you just felt like it was a good one, I believe, was what we talked about. How is it that you're so confident that you know where they're bedded? Is it because of what you found in the spring, in terms of beds themselves, coupled with some rubs and scrapes and things of that nature?
Right. A lot of times the same tree, the same sign that I had found the previous spring or even that fall, that next following hunting season, that tree's rubbed again. The sign's appearing almost exactly like it did before. At that point, I'm pretty much under the assumption it's the same deer that made the sign from the previous year. A lot of times the same rubs are rubbed a little, and so that gives me the confidence to believe I'm still after that mature deer that I from the sign that I saw before, and plus what maybe I'm seeing this year. But after hunting up here for so long, and just in my mind it's worked for me, it's just confidence. Once I put in all the hard work that I have, and I just get that sixth sense, if you will, that this is the spot. And when I have that confidence, I just wait it out. And when I'm sitting there and not seeing the deer I'm after, or maybe even any deer, when I know the sign's there and I did my homework and I did everything right, each day that goes by that he hasn't showed up, and if he's still alive, to me it's more in my favor that now he is going to come through there. And if I'm doing the things right of getting in and out, I mean, I guess I haven't mentioned that, but one of the most important things when hunting up here, I think, also is to be able to get in and out of your stand quiet. I mean, you just sometimes when I go in the morning or leave at night, I almost still hunt out away from my stand for a couple 100 yards, that I'm walking very slow, just making sure that I'm not spooking any deer to allow that buck to know that I'm even in there hunting. And that's one of the things what Todd alluded to earlier was the number of deer that we have up here, especially now. There just isn't the number of deer. You're not having all kinds of deer, circling around you like you do in the farm country. You're worried about does that much. I mean, yeah, there's some, but for the most part, there isn't the deer I'm after where I'm hunting. There isn't a lot of deer in these areas. I'm not always hunting right where the majority of the deer are. Maybe even the most sign. I'm hunting one particular big buck and his sign, and so a lot of times there's just not a lot of deer in that area. But still, in my mind, I've got to get in and out quietly. And if I'm spooking deer as I'm getting to my stand or leaving, that's when I would just abandon that spot possibly and go to another spot that I've found in a different area where I think there's a big buck and go from there. But I just really can't stress enough about not spooking deer getting in and out. And that's why I'm not hunting in, where they're feeding, where you'd be walking in the morning and jumping deer, or in the evenings leaving. I'm definitely, closer to that bedding area, and, just there again, just to not allow other deer to know that I'm even in there. And so sometimes the route of getting in and out may be a lot longer and a lot tougher than what it could be, but to do it right, sometimes you got to walk that extra half mile to get there.
Brad's confidence is definitely his experience. But if he's not seeing the sign in those areas, you're not wasting time there. I mean, you're on to the next one, and you got to have those indications, those sign, whether it's a big track, big sign, big rubs from previous. He's not sitting in a tree hoping to get lucky. He's strategically planned that hunt based on the sign and whatnot. So that's where a lot of the confidence comes from. Is you just got to know he's there, and once you do, I kind of can relate. I don't care about any other deer. That's the only one I want to see. And if anything, I don't want to see any other deer because it just ruin your chances, if anything, along the way. But Brad, one of the things?
You're right. I mean, if the sign's not there, obviously, I just don't have one spot up here I'm hunting. Like I said, I have 3 or 4, maybe 5 different spots picked out that I'll go to in the fall. Once I see the sign in one of them, that's where I'm going to be. And sometimes, too, it's hard. I haven't really found a lot of spots where you can consistently kill really big bucks in some of these areas in public land because there are just not that many of them. So sometimes you may have to, if you do harvest one, you may have to move 4 or 5 miles, or more, just, to a different area. And so over the years, I have 4 or 5 different spots that I really like to hunt. And in them area, I'll go check them areas out. And one of them, generally speaking, will have the sign that I'm looking for. And once I find that, then that's pretty much the area that I target and hunt. And when you were talking, because of my job, all this back in this, Jason, when you were talking before, was the reason in the spring and with my job and in the fall, I don't have a lot of time at times to get out and do, scouting every day and looking. And vacation-wise, I might have had a week or two. So at that point, when weather gets right and take off and go, you're making everything happen in probably a 10-day period if it's gonna. And then if it doesn't, obviously you got weekends and a few days here and there. But for the most part, with the jobs and stuff like that, I think, most people hunting, they've got to put everything together in a short period of time.
I guess 2 questions, and maybe they can be answered in one answer. What's the right sign, and what's the sign or lack thereof that makes you go 4 or 5 miles away?
Basically, the one sign. Up when you're not seeing. Sometimes maybe you had seen a deer the previous year, and he maybe wasn't a shooter, but he might be back in that area the following year. But I guess the number one sign that you're looking for up here, most part for me, is just a big track. That track distinguishes itself from all the other ones. You're hunting, a mature deer. Now, what it has for horns, a lot of times, sometimes they're really good scoring. Other times they may not be. They may be a 7 or 8 year old mature whitetail, and it might only score 130 or 140. But in my book, that's as good a trophy as it gets.
Brad, a real quick question on your tracks. When you say when you're tracking big bucks with big tracks, is there any tips that you can give anybody else? I don't know what kind of roads now, and also I don't know if we identified exactly where you're at, but Brad's almost in Canada. I'll just put it to you that way. He's about far north in Wisconsin you can get. So this is truly some big woods country. But is there?
Well, a lot of times, if you're not looking for, in tracks in the snow, obviously are easy, but a lot of times we don't have snow early. In these hardwood ridges, you're not. You're just seeing a track here and there in the mud. A lot of times, you're not tracking them all the way across, in the leaves, but you're just looking for, that big track mixed in with, with some big rubs, hopefully, or some rubs, just, sign in general. But generally, a big track means a big deer. So for the most part, so that's one of the main signs that I'm looking for up here is, and that's where it's so much different for some people, and they're probably, where they want to know what they're hunting. I guess I love hunting the ghost, kind of. I just it doesn't bother me to not always know what that deer is. I mean, are you always harvesting or seeing the animal that made that track? Sometimes maybe it's just a different deer, but generally speaking, I mean, if it's not that deer and it's still a mature one, I mean, it isn't like we have a lot of mature, I mean, some, but the sheer volume and numbers is not like they are in Iowa or Illinois or something like that. So when you see a mature whitetail in a lot of these areas, it's probably the same one that's made the sign or the tracks that you're looking for.
Well, there you have it, our conversation with Brad Kuhnert, at least part number 1. Hope you enjoyed that. There was tons of useful information, and next week will be no different. I want to remind everyone that if you could, please go to iTunes and give us a review. If you can give us 5 stars, that'd be great. We need your reviews, please. They help us to get better. Also, if you have an idea for a show, please go to our Facebook page or Instagram or whatever, tag us in it, and tell us who or what it is that you want us to be talking about. With that, that's about all I have for this week. We look forward to you tuning in again next week, where we'll do part 2 with Brad Kuhnert. I hope you're having a great hunting season. Be safe. Good luck. The fun time of year is just right around the corner. Jason out.